We're going to talk a little bit about sleep. So for anyone who hasn't been here yet, my name is Luke Krinsky. I have a PhD and a master's degree in exercise physiology. Spent a bunch of time studying different lifestyle interventions and the effect that they have on our overall health. Then started medical school at the University of Minnesota a couple years ago. And the bummer about med school is we don't really talk about this stuff. And I want to keep doing everything I can to keep educating people about what is, important in terms of tools that you can use outside of just pharmaceuticals and such that you can really have in your toolbox to take care of yourself. And so, we'll dive into it. We've gone over a bunch of different topics, and today we're going to talk about sleep. So the agenda for today is, as I mentioned, sleep. We're going to talk about the physiology of sleep. So like, what is sleep? Why do we sleep? And then what are some tools you can do or you can utilize at home to try to improve your sleep? Because as I'm hopefully going to convince you, sleep is absolutely essential. We've given a couple, or I've given a couple lectures about nutrition and exercise. Nutrition, if you recall how variable the evidence in nutrition research is. Everyone's like, oh, this is how you eat, this is how you should eat, this is the right way, this is the wrong way. But you look into the research and it's like, you obviously don't know what you're talking about because nutrition research is all over the place. You don't just get, this food causes this benefit like you do with things like exercise, where I don't care where you're looking into the research, you'd be strapped to find any studies that show exercise having a negative impact on overall health. This is actually a similar finding that you'll see in sleep research as well, where good quality of sleep over and over and over again is having these positive outcomes. You're not, it's again really hard to come across a study that shows people who sleep better have worse outcomes in terms of their health. So it's right in line with exercise in terms of like this amazing tool you can utilize to take care of your health. So what is sleep? Now, if you try to put into perspective the importance of sleep, try to think of it this way. Why would us as humans spend 1/3 of our lives doing something where we are essentially unconscious? That has no use to us. We're like, if you think of like when people had to go hunt and gather food and cook food and reproduce and be social, why would 1/3 of the amount of time in our day be not able to participate in any of these things? Now, it's not actually like super relevant anymore where I don't have to go hunt for food. I can sit in my bed all day and actually just order. I can get Uber Eats and get my groceries delivered to me. Heck, I can get like a light bulb and a pet goldfish delivered to my floor or my door. I don't ever have to leave my house. But really, historically, that obviously wasn't the case. So we know sleep is absolutely essential. Now, when we look into the research of sleep, like why do we sleep? It started with, okay, we know it's important for our brain. Our brain's kind of shutting off in this, moment of us being unconscious. And we started to learn, okay, poor sleep is having an impact on our cognitive function. It makes sense, this is all happening within our brain. But we're going to talk about some other aspects of sleep. It actually is influencing every physiological function in your body, not just what's happening in your nervous system. What sleep really is. So when you lie down into bed, what's going to happen is all these vital processes that are happening, your heart rate, blood pressure, body temperature, a lot of different hormones are going to start to change. Your body's going to start to relax. Your heart rate's going to go down along with blood pressure. You're going to start to breathe a little slower. Your body temperature actually declines a couple degrees. All these things have to happen for your body to go into this restful state of sleep. And I hope none of you are sleeping right now as I'm talking about this, but I don't see any eyes closed. But so that process has to occur for you to go to sleep. And then you go right into these early stages of sleep, stage 1 and 2. And it's very quick. Stage 1 is this restfulness where you're susceptible to being woken up. This is where you like doze off, but a sound wakes you right back up. You're in stage 1 sleep. Then you get into stage 2 where it's still light sleep. You still have that susceptibility to be awoken, but a lot happens in stage 2 sleep, and we spend so much of our time in this stage 2 sleep. And it plays a huge role in development and memory. But then you get into these absolutely essential stages of sleep. Your deep sleep and your REM sleep. Those are the ones you hear all about. Now, deep sleep is considered non-REM sleep, and you'll find some researchers talk about deep sleep being broken into stages 3 and 4, but really those two stages, so stage 3 and 4, actually resemble each other pretty similarly. When you're in stage 3 and 4, you're in deep sleep. Deep sleep is very heavy early on when we fall asleep. So you go through these 90-minute cycles of going stage 1, 2, 3, 4, REM, back up 1, 2, 3, 4. You go through these cycles throughout the night. But your body tends to really want that deep sleep early on. It's going to get the other stages, but it's going to prioritize that deep sleep early. And then towards the 4 hours before you wake up in the morning, it's going to shift to, okay, now let's focus on REM sleep. And that's not to say that these stages aren't happening all throughout the night. They are. It's just your body seems to prioritize deep sleep early on, REM sleep later on. Make sense? Everyone with me? Cool. My mouth always gets so dry when I present. Now, this all is regulated by what we call our circadian rhythm, our sleep-wake cycle. I touched on this a little bit with the nutrition lecture, and your body has these physiological processes that change throughout the day. Feeling awake, like at certain times of day, you feel more awake than others, and that circadian rhythm is what's regulating that. You get hungry at certain times, you feel more active, you feel more alert, you feel sleepier, and circadian rhythm is what regulates these sleep cycles. So now we've got kind of a good understanding of what sleep is. Now, in terms of how much sleep we need, you often hear the truth of people saying 7 to 8 hours. Over and over again, that seems to be very consistent. It's not like other areas of research that seem to evolve over time. 7 to 8 hours is a pretty solid goal to have, and the research shows that as soon as you deviate from those numbers, that's where you start to get these health impacts. And there's a reason it stops at 8 too. There's such thing as hypersomnia. Sleeping too much actually has been shown to be correlated with different diseases as well. Now, sleeping too much causing these diseases, we don't really know that. You may be sleeping too much because you have some sort of underlying physiological impairment that's causing that. But you want to try to shoot for 8 hours if you can every night. We're going to talk about what happens if you don't do that. Now, society now is kind of set up in this, we've shifted our workforce in society to be so heavy towards people who have this, what's called an early chronotype. I talked about circadian rhythms. Everyone's circadian rhythm is different. Dave's over here yawning. See, he's at the time where he's, this is where you get, I'm just kidding, Dave. So everyone's circadian rhythm is completely different. Okay, and you'll meet people in your lives that tend to stay up later. They're just more comfortable later at night, and they sleep in later. And we often kind of look at those people in the mornings as like, oh, you're lazy. Why'd you stay up so late? Like, wake up early in the morning, have a cup of coffee with me. And like, I'm a morning person, and people are really proud of that. But really, there is underlying biology, and there are genes that we are aware of that are responsible for these chronotypes and people having a morning chronotype and night owls. Those do exist. So I just want to give this backdrop of how sleep works. You're shooting for this 8 hours. These are these different sleep stages. Now let's segue kind of into why do we sleep in terms of our health. Now you look into the research. I talked about comparing it to this exercise research in terms of you will see time and time again. There is a multitude of data suggesting that people who sleep less than 7 hours per night are more susceptible to these chronic conditions. And I'm talking here where you consistently get, shorter amounts of sleep overnight. You're more susceptible to things like cardiovascular disease, cancer, metabolic disease, obesity, Alzheimer's, depression, anxiety. Time and time again, you do see the literature show this of poor sleep causes a spiraling factor of all these processes in your body that contribute to these chronic conditions. And the worst part is those chronic conditions cause poor sleep in so many different instances. And so where my dissertation research was in, which I'll bring up some of the data, it was working with patients who had cancer that were going through chemos that caused poor sleep in itself. And then you sleep so poorly, and then it contributes to worsening of the diseases and things. And so, you get this snowballing, spiraling effect of one thing causing the other. And so this is with chronic poor sleep, the susceptibility of these diseases. Now, what about with one night of poor sleep? So with just one night of poor sleep, You can find papers of labs that will, there's actually these sleep labs where they bring people in and they've got a bed, they try to set it up as comfortable as possible. You go through what's called a familiarization period where, you take a couple nights of sleep to try to get comfortable, because if anyone has slept outside of their own bed, you don't sleep as well when you do that. So you go through these familiarization processes, and then they actually study how these individuals sleep, and then they can make them stay awake for certain amounts of time and then make them sleep for, or compare them to groups that are sleeping for 8 hours. So you take individuals having one night to sleep 4.5 hours versus somebody who sleeps 8 hours. And then you test what's happening with these individuals. And you'll see in papers, there's a group of papers that study athletes. Athletic performance is impaired like crazy. And then the vice versa, if you take a group of athletes and have them sleep well for a week leading up to some sort of event, they're gonna perform better 10 times out of 10. And so this physiological function, your exercise performance is impaired. So strength, VO2 max, which we talked about, that declines just one night of poor sleep. You probably feel this. When you don't sleep well, you wake up, you know that right away. So every aspect of your day is going to change. What's really interesting in this graph that I have here is what happens to your metabolism, your metabolic health, which in the nutrition lecture I talked about, having poor metabolic health, contributing to obesity, and then again, correlating with all these different diseases like type 2 diabetes and so on. And one night of poor sleep, and actually, sorry, this wasn't in one night, this was in 4 nights. Okay, and what they did is they had people sleep 4.5 hours versus 8 hours. These were healthy individuals. And they then looked at what is their fat cells' response to insulin. So if you recall, I talked about diabetes. The underlying issue is that your muscles and your fat are not very receptive of insulin to take in glucose. You end up getting high blood glucose and it wreaks havoc on your organs down the line. So if your fat cells don't respond to insulin very well, that's a metabolic deficiency or metabolic impairment that you have. Just 4 nights of poor sleep cause these individuals to have significant impairments in insulin response. So this top curve here, and I know this glare, it makes it really hard to see. The top curve here is people that slept normally. Insulin responded, or the fat cells responded to insulin immediately, took in that glucose. Sleeping poor, they were not able to take in that glucose, and it was comparable to individuals with obesity and type 2 diabetes and their metabolic function, their insulin response. Just sleeping poorly 4 days, then you resemble somebody who has, these metabolic conditions. Have I convinced you yet? It's important. All right. So I wish we had more time. This actually is the area that I did my PhD dissertation, so I'm super passionate about it and spent so much time studying it. And again, we'll talk about the data that I found in some of my research. But yeah, I wish we had some more time to talk about it because I could go on and on about sleep. All right, so what can you do? You now know the importance of sleep. Now, before you get into some of the tools that you can utilize to improve your own sleep, you want to try to figure out some things like, how is your sleep quality right now? There's some easy surveys. You can go in and see your physician and get a referral to a sleep physician that will actually assess these things. And that's the best way, the gold standard. They'll do what's called polysomnography. They can actually test brain waves and see how much time you're spending in different stages of sleep and give you that number really well. But there are surveys that you can do as well. And these are compared against that gold standard to show that they're actually correlated. So you can do these things at home. To find your sleep quality, you can fill out what's called the Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index Survey, PSQI, to figure out if you have sleep apnea. So you want to find out if you have 2 conditions, sleep apnea or insomnia. These are chronic conditions, that there is a genetic component to these, that your poor sleep it's going to require a lot further intervention to treat these things. You want to treat insomnia and sleep apnea before you get into utilizing these tools. So you, again, speak with your physician about these things to try to figure out if you're having significant issues with sleep. You want to know if you do have sleep apnea or insomnia here. And so sleep apnea test, there is a survey. It's called the Stop Bang test. And for each of these surveys too, you can go and find scoring, evaluate, and categorize yourself in these. And then insomnia, there's the Insomnia Severity Index survey. And then to figure out your chronotype. So you can figure out what's called the morning, evening, or you can fill out the morningness, eveningness questionnaire. That's to figure out, I mean, and you probably kind of know if you're a morning versus evening type. One of the interesting things as you look at individuals across age spans, children tend to have teenagers tend to have a very late chronotype. And we kind of put them at such a disadvantage here where we have these early start times and you're telling your teenager, go to bed because you got to wake up at 5:30 to catch a bus for 7:10 start time here. And you think of what that does to teenagers, like that's the age where you need sleep for development. Kids actually need a lot more sleep than 8 hours. They need more closer to 10 hours. And so you're now trying to force somebody who has a late chronotype to sleep earlier, and then you're forcing them to wake up, and that's totally out of line with their circadian rhythm. And as you look at people as they age, once you get a lot later in life, that chronotype starts to shift. You start to get to an earlier chronotype. This happens to everyone, no matter what your initial chronotype is. That's why there's the early bird special at all these, like in Florida, it's very common for retired individuals, it's true. You do shift to that earlier chronotype later in life, but it's not consistent and not everyone's the same. So it is important to kind of figure out what is your chronotype so that you can adjust your sleep schedule, because you want to make sure you can sleep when your body needs that sleep, and then you stick to that. And we'll talk about sleep consistency here in a bit. All right, so now how can we improve our sleep? Oh, I didn't switch. Oh, I should have, before I switched the slide, had you guess the #1 way to improve your sleep. Exercise. So this is actually from my research that I did. What I did is I had individuals who were going through chemotherapy or radiation or a combination of both, and I tested their sleep, and everyone in the study actually scored below, or they had poor quality of sleep. I measured the efficiency, how well they were able to stay asleep after they fell asleep, and coming in at baseline, they had poor quality sleep, as we would expect from somebody who's going through chemo and radiation. And then what I did is I had a group of participants exercise for an hour 3 times per week for 12 weeks, and then I tested these things again. I also monitored throughout to see, the progress with all this stuff, and then compared them to a group of those patients who were sedentary, who weren't exercising, and found that the cancer patients who were going through chemo and radiation, if they were exercising for those 12 weeks, had a significant improvement in sleep. And the sleep staging that was very significant was light sleep, that stage 1 and 2 sleep, and then we also found it in total sleep. There was a trend to an increase in REM sleep and deep sleep as well. These studies are ongoing right now, but we found this change that actually put these individuals back into good overall quality of sleep. So exercise was able to put them back into that, 7 to 8 hours total, having good sleep efficiency. And so, what is that doing to, the immune health and the prognosis of the cancer and so on. So this is in, a population who suffers from poor sleep quality to begin with. Imagine what it does to healthy individuals. You look at the research with healthy individuals and you'll see, if you exercise, you're sleeping better. A lot of people, tend to say if you exercise too close to bed, it might impair sleep. And there's a little bit of research on that, but it's not consistent, because if you raise your metabolic rate, I talked about how your body temperature has to cool down for you to go to bed. So if you exercise and if you eat a large meal before bed, your body temperature is going to have a hard time dropping. But there are papers that show you can exercise right before bed and fall right into sleep, because what exercise does is it actually improves your ability to do what's called thermoregulation. It improves your body's ability to drop its body temperature. So I don't want to tell you don't exercise at night. I would never tell anyone to focus on those fine little details. Just exercise. However you spin it, just get out there and exercise. It's going to help. This is especially true in the research on adolescents. So teenagers, and we talk about this population who is at this society disadvantage that we've set up for them. Having physically active children and encouraging activity is going to improve their sleep. Hopefully they'll fall asleep earlier. And we can help with that process a little bit. All right, so some other strategies. Now there's a lot to unpack here. And I know that I list a ton because there are so many things that you can do before you have to venture into these pharmaceutical interventions. And so I listed a ton of tools here, and I'll go through them really quick. Darkness. Now, try to make the room as dark as you possibly can wherever you sleep. You don't want any sort of light influence. Your brain produces melatonin. You've probably heard of melatonin and maybe taken melatonin as a sleep aid. Your body naturally produces that from what's called the pineal gland. And that pineal gland is in direct communication with the outside world. There's these little nerves in the back of your eye, and they connect to what's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus of the hypothalamus. There's a little bit of my dissertation research, sorry. And they're very sensitive to light. And when that communication is happening, it's telling the suprachiasmatic nucleus, hey, shut off melatonin production because it's daytime, baby. We're ready to rock and roll. And so when you have any light in your house, your TV, your phone, that communication is directly to that area suppressing melatonin. And so you want to make sure you don't have any light influence that's suppressing that, because melatonin is, you think of it as sleep pressure. And that melatonin builds up. Think of it as like a pressure cooker. And that melatonin is just building and building and building until eventually it pressures you into sleep. So when you take melatonin as a supplement, it's helping with sleep pressure. I mean, you may get a placebo effect thinking it helps you stay asleep throughout the night and such, but it's actually just helping you fall asleep. Because we have, in society right now, we're playing around on our phones, we're watching TV at night, so you lay in bed and all of a sudden you can't fall asleep, you're just laying there. Well, it's because you don't have any melatonin production there, so taking a supplement actually will help, put you into that sleep or start these stages of sleep. And if you do take it though, you want to try to take advantage of the circadian rhythm and time it out consistently at the same exact time. Try to take a lower dose and compare it to your physiological function. And also, obviously, consult your physician before you start taking any supplement that you haven't taken or changing any dose and timing and things. I'm not a licensed physician, and so I'm not here to give you this medical advice. So limit blue light. A lot of lights now are LED. LED has a wavelength that is very suppressive of melatonin production. So try to limit that early on before you plan to fall asleep. Turn off any non-essential lights. Don't look at the clock when you're sleeping and you wake up. Make sure there's not a clock face facing you, because I'm sure you've noticed this if you have an early flight or if you have to get up early, you're not sleeping well. Your brain, even while you're unconscious in sleep, your brain is fully aware of the fact of what time it is and when you have to wake up, and you do not want to miss that alarm clock. You don't want to sleep through it. Same thing happens when you wake up and you glance at the clock. If you wake up and go to the bathroom, you are way better off not knowing what time it is so that you can fall back asleep and not be stressed and not have your brain, it's going to be harder for your brain to dip back down into those stages. Limit screen time. This has to do with the blue light, but not only that, the just stimulation of your brain. If you're just constantly like wired, you're not allowing your body to drop heart rate, drop blood pressure, and all those things to fall asleep. Consistency. This, going to bed and waking up at the same time is one of the easiest things that you can do that will have such an impact on your sleep. Try to set the same alarm in the morning. That's going to be the easiest thing for you. Set the same alarm in the morning, and then you're, early on and you might feel really tired, but that actually is going to help you in the long run because you're going to go to bed earlier then, and then over time you're going to be able to transition that sleep schedule. Consistency is going to be key. The temperature. Drop the temperature in the room any way you can. Sleeping in a warmer environment is going to be much harder for your body to cool down those 2 degrees to fall asleep. There are cooling mattresses and such, but any way that you can make sure your body temperature isn't super high so you can't fall asleep is going to help you. There is research on heating yourself up 90 minutes before bed to start the cooling process. Seems a little counterintuitive. I saw your face, Mary. Like, what? Heating yourself up? So if you heat yourself up, yeah, your body's, like, whoa, I got to cool myself down. And that will carry you into this sleep of, it'll continue to cool itself down. So, so you could take a bath, and then also a sauna if you have access to it, 2 hours before bed. I actually have a podcast coming out on Sunday. I'll give you the link for it, where I talk about all the benefits of a sauna, and among those is, what it does to our sleep. And so if you can figure out a way to heat yourself up, whether, take a bath, this was studied in a group of women that were suffering from insomnia, and they just did a hot tub 90 minutes before and found significant improvements in sleep. So take a hot bath, take a hot shower, get your body temperature up, and that might help. So no alcohol. People are like, oh, if I have one glass of wine, it's going to help me fall asleep. That is just absolutely not true. Alcohol totally disrupts your regular sleep cycle. You will not dip into that REM sleep that we absolutely need. You'll be waking up to go to the bathroom. So if you can get rid of alcohol entirely, your sleep will improve. Be mindful of caffeine. Caffeine has what's called a really high half-life. It circulates around in your body for very long, up to 12 hours and even then some. So having caffeine anytime after noon, I usually tell people is might have an impact on your sleep 12 hours later. So caffeine, sunlight early, so circadian rhythm. We want to try to wake our bodies up. And if you can get sunlight early on to start that wakeful process, it's going to help regulate this rhythm of sleeping and waking. Same thing is true with exercise. Meditation is an awesome tool that is just, later at night, if you can try to calm your mind down a little bit to help with some of the, we have access to our phones and social media and all this stuff, and try to help with some of the anxiety to help you fall asleep. Timing of exercise and meal, again, don't spend too much time on this, but don't eat a bunch of food right before you go to bed. That we do know you're not going to be able to fall asleep. Somewhere around 3 hours seems to be a good time to stop taking in calories, if 3 hours before bedtime. Sleep opportunity. Give yourself the opportunity to get 8 hours of sleep. Make sure you are in your bed for at least 8 hours. If you're not in your bed, you're not going to be sleeping for 8 hours. You could fall asleep on the couch and then move to the bed, but just try to give yourself that opportunity. 8 hours every night. And then there is the pharmaceutical industry of, their sleep medications are very common. The industry actually is estimated to be worth $28 billion, but it's declining. And the reason it's declining is because a lot of the research that is showing when you take these pharmaceutical drugs, it's, people are getting knocked out like that. You go right into this, deep sleep, but it's disrupting those sleep cycles. You're not getting these proper cycles, and so you're not actually getting this restorative sleep that your body needs. And there are some new medications that are coming out that seem to help with some of the cycles. Who knows, maybe we'll see some better pharmaceutical interventions over time. But right now it seems to be that that if you're taking a sleep medication, it is actually going to impair your sleep. So you may want to consider that, and obviously, again, talk to your physician about this stuff. But yeah, so that is the sleep lecture here.